name?
Alexander Boris Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for attending today and for the provision of your witness statement 255836. It's dated the 31st of August, as you know, and it contains the usual declaration as to the truth of its contents on the final page, I think page 233. Mr. Johnson, you were, of course, Prime Minister between the 24th of July 2019, when you were invited to form an administration following the resignation of Theresa May, MP, as leader of the Conservative Party, and the 6th of September 2022, you having announced your resignation earlier that year on the 7th of July. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, Mr. Keith. By your leave, my lady, can I just say how glad I am to be at this inquiry, and how sorry I am for the pain and the loss and the suffering
sit down.
Of
please stop.
COVID
Johnson.
victims.
Please sit down. Please sit down, or I'm afraid you'll have to leave the hearing room. I'm sorry, if you don't sit down, I'm going to ask the ushers to get you to leave. Right, ushers, please, could you ask them to leave?
Could I say, by your leave, that I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims and their families. And grateful though I am to the hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers and many other public servants and people in all walks of life who helped to protect our country throughout a dreadful pandemic, I do hope that this inquiry will help to get the answers to the very difficult questions that those victims and those families are rightly asking, so that we can protect ourselves better, help each other to help protect ourselves better in the future and prevent further suffering. And if it's not too impertinent, may I say, as the person, as you rightly say, Mr. Keith, who set up this inquiry, how grateful I am to you for what you're doing and for the immense care that you are plainly taking.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, just a few more questions please, in relation to your career. On the 9th of June 2023, did you announce your intention to stand down as the Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip? You then, I think, formally resigned the following Monday, the 12th of June, when you were appointed Steward and Bailiff of the 300s of Chiltern. You were, of course, previously Foreign Secretary and Mayor of London. You correctly observe that you yourself announced the institution of this statutory inquiry on the 12th of May 2021. You ordered the institution of a full and independent public inquiry, did you not?
I did, Mr. Keith, and I believe that's the right way forward.
When you made that announcement, you said this: amid such tragedy, the state has an obligation to examine its actions as rigorously and candidly as possible. The number of deaths across the United Kingdom, calculated whether by registration on the death certificate through COVID or the measure of excess deaths, is now over 230,000. By any measure, Mr. Johnson, that is a shocking figure and a terrible loss of life. Is that the tragedy to which you were referring when you said, in this tragedy, the state has an obligation to examine its actions?
That is certainly the core of the tragedy, yes.
Do you agree that if the protection of life is the preeminent duty, that every government owes to its citizens, then the number of those who died is an important, if not the most important, marker against which your administration be measured.
I certainly think it was what we were trying to prevent, was the loss of life, absolutely.
The virus left in its wake, of course, not just death, but injury and misery, and indirectly through the lockdowns, it left pain and incalculable economic and societal damage. Were those and are those impacts which you also envisaged this inquiry would look at when you ordered its institution?
Of course.
Do you accept, and we may, I think, presume from your opening remarks that you do you accept that the bereaved and those who suffered, of whom there are very many in number, are entitled to no less than an absolutely full and rigorous scrutiny?
Of course.
When you made that announcement, you also said that this process will place the state's actions under the microscope, and the government would be required to disclose all relevant information. In light of those words, could I just ask you, please, to confirm what your approach has been to the disclosure of your own COVID-related emails, WhatsApps and notes?
I've done my best to give everything of any conceivable relevance.
Has that always been your position, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Could we have 265619, please, page 68? This is a WhatsApp between your former Permanent Secretary, number 10, and then latterly Cabinet Secretary, and your principal private secretary, Simon Case, and respectively Martin Reynolds. And the Cabinet Secretary said the Prime Minister is mad if he doesn't think his WhatsApps will become public via the COVID inquiry. He was clearly not in the mood for that discussion tonight. That date, the 20th of December 2021, was just 5 days after you had in fact appointed Milady as the chair of this inquiry. Was there a debate at that time within government as to whether or not your WhatsApps should be disclosed? And if so, whether or not they would become public by virtue of their disclosure in this process?
I don't remember the conversation to which the Cabinet Secretary is referring, and I've handed over all the relevant WhatsApps.
The inquiry has indeed requested all the key COVID-related texts, WhatsApps and so on from January 20 to February 22, and it must be made absolutely clear that throughout the course of the litigation in the summer and throughout these proceedings, you have made available, it would seem, everything in your possession. You made clear, I think, through your solicitors, however, that you had a phone which you used from May 2021, and you've made available the WhatsApps and the emails from that phone. Therefore, between May 21 and February 22, the end of the period that the inquiry was requesting about. But following a well-publicised security breach, you had not been able to use to access the previous phone because you'd stopped using it, and you were fearful that if you tried to access it, you'd delete its data. Is that right?
That's right.
Were you able to get access ultimately to the contents of that first phone, the old phone?
Yes, so we sent it off to some technical people and they activated it.
Was there a time gap, as your solicitors have described it, on that phone, a period between the 30th of January 2020 and June 2020, during which time the WhatsApps have not been capable of being reinstalled and disclosed?
That's right.
Do you know why your phone was missing those 5,000 odd WhatsApps?
I don't know the exact reason, but it looks as though it's something to do with the app going down and then coming up again, but somehow not automatically erasing all the things between that date when it went down and the moment when it was last backed up. So I can't give you the technical explanation, but that's the best I'm able to give.